Hey guys, what's up? Today I'll be doing a video where I get to talk about one of my favorite death metal bands of all time, the classic New York East Coast death metal band Incantation. Today I'll be covering their second album and the two versions of it. The first being The Mortal Throne of Nazarene, which unfortunately I do not own to show, but most of you guys have probably seen it by now. And the alternate mix version of the same album released a year later titled Upon the Throne of Apocalypse. Now, this originally started out as me wanting to do a review for this because it has a lot of mixed feelings when it comes to Incantation fans. The production is different from the second album. I'll go into the backstory behind the two releases, but some people love it, and some people think it's a pointless release. So I figured I'd combine reviewing Incantation's second material, but also comparing the re-recording Upon the Throne of Apocalypse to the original titled The Mortal Throne of Nazarene. And I wanted to do it because I'm a fan of both albums. I'm a fan of both recordings, and then at the end, I will give my humble opinion on which I prefer. So, after the success of Incantation's debut album, The Mighty Onward to Golgotha, the band in 1994 geared up to release their second album, and they sent the rough mix to Relapse Records, their label at the time, and they hated it, and they said, "You're gonna do it over again, and you're gonna change the production." And they kind of had some creative control over what happened. And then there was kind of a big mess, according to the liner notes in this LP, where the engineer was trying to take on a producer role and he tried to have too much creative control. And it sounds like the whole studio experience of The Mortal Throne of Nazarene was a disaster. But in a last-ditch effort, John McEntee took the tapes from the whole session and released it as the second album after some re-editing and stuff like that. And then a year later, Incantation released this, which is supposedly what they had hoped the second album would sound like. And in comparison to the first album, the production is drastically different. The debut album, Onward to Golgotha, just has some of the most monstrous sounding production of all time. That album was one of the first albums that I had heard in death metal that wasn't a more sound recording, and I was really used to that tight and punchy feel of that more sound recording. And when I first listened to the Incantation album, it was crazy. The sound just feels like it's bouncing all around you. The drums feel like it was recorded in this massive hall with a 100-foot ceiling. Craig Pollard's vocals are just an absolute monstrous attack. So hearing the second Incantation album compared to the first can be a bit jarring. Not only is the production different, but the music is a bit different. Even from the first riff in the opening song, Demonic Incarnate, you can tell Incantation is going to be taking a little bit of a different direction on this one. Maybe slowing down the tempo so all the songs don't have a breakneck pace, exploring a little bit more of that doomy section and doomy styles, which they would become very known for throughout later albums and their discography. So, there are things I like about The Mortal Throne of Nazarene more, and there are things I like about Upon the Throne of Apocalypse more. I will say what's kind of interesting is, although The Mortal Throne of Nazarene has some weaker production, it really goes to show that Incantation doesn't need to rely on a beefed up production to sound phenomenal or to sound heavy, because that thing, Mortal Throne of Nazarene, has one of the plainest and just kind of weak sounding productions in all of death metal, but Incantation still manages to sound absolutely heavy and absolutely evil, especially Craig Pollard's vocals. On the debut album, they sound gigantic and monstrous and awesome. And of course, that is just how his vocals sound, but they're being combined with the great production to put together an absolutely unholy vocal delivery. And on the second album, you lose the production, but it also goes to show you that Craig Pollard does not need good production to sound absolutely terrifying. The vocals are still just as guttural, just as demonic, And it's cool to hear in that simple style of production that Incantation can still be very crazy and heavy. Also, the bass is a bit more audible on the original recordings, so that's a plus on that side. On Upon the Throne of Apocalypse, one thing negative I will say straight off the bat, I don't enjoy the reverse track listing. All the tracks are flipped around, so you have Demonic Incarnate starting the album, ending the album, and the closing track on Mortal Throne of Nazarene opening this, which would be Abolishment of Immaculate Serenity, which is an awesome Incantation song. I think that was a big step for them and big step for John, where he was wanting to take the band. That's a very drawn out, super slow and scary, a foreboding doom song that I felt really helped close out the album, whereas starting the album, it just feels a bit weird to me. I wouldn't say it's a huge negative, it's just something I do wish this was not a reverse track listing. But some things I love about this album, of course, the production is closer to Onward to Golgotha, which helps the music. Craig's vocals, they're given that extra boost. All that reverb, all that craziness is there. I think the drums sound better. But another negative thing I do have to say about this album, sometimes it can sound a little distorted, but in its defense, I think this isn't supposed to be quite like a full studio re-recording. It's a little bit like half rough studio mixes, and it's just something to be like a little bonus thing. It's not supposed to be a super clean, full-length style production. But overall, there are songs on here which you can really tell have that vibe of Onward to Golgotha, such as Blissful Blood Shower. Like, that sounds straight off the debut. The production really helps beef it up. So I feel like a lot of songs benefit from the huge production, especially songs like Blissful Blood Shower and Emaciated Holy Figure. Those songs feel like they could have been straight off Onward to Golgotha, but they still have that Incantation vibe that John wanted to progress the band with and change their sound up just a little bit. But overall, when you compare Mortal Throne of Nazarene to the debut, in terms of popularity, it is extremely overshadowed. But if you talk to a lot of diehard Incantation fans, a lot of them will argue the Mortal Throne of Nazarene is better or just as good as the debut. And I would definitely agree. I mean, it's an underrated release in the death metal world. And I think it's different than Onward to Golgotha, but it's just as good in a different way. Some of my favorite Incantation material appears off these recordings. Emaciated Holy Figure and Demonic Incarnate are probably two of my favorite Incantation songs, which start off the album. Not to mention Abolishment of Immaculate Serenity, which is a phenomenal take on just the death doom style that Incantation went on to perfect. So, now it comes for my answer. Do I prefer the original Mortal Throne of Nazarene recording or the re-recording or the mixed, edited, different version Upon the Throne of Apocalypse? Like I said, I like both recordings. Usually when I listen to the album, I go back and forth. Like, when I listen to it, I'll listen to the original. When I listen to the next time, I'll listen to the re-recording. But that being said, my humble opinion goes to Upon the Throne of the Apocalypse. Funny enough, I have more negative things to say about this than the debut, just because there's some things that I really dislike about it, such as the reverse track listing. Sometimes everything is just a little too distorted and the vocals seem peaky. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take it over the original recording just because I feel like it's closer to what Incantation intended, and it just gives Incantation's already heavy and demonic sound that extra boost it needs to just be that much more awesome. And I thought I had a lot of fun making this video, and I like the idea of comparing the original and the re-recording. So if any of you guys have any thoughts on which one you like better, let me know. And thank you guys for watching.